we'll get started with some introductions. So I'll pass off to Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Drew. I'm the stock assessment scientist for the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and northern shrimp is one of the species that I work on.
I'm Maggie Hunter. I'm on the technical committee representing Maine.
I'm Ann Richards. I'm with NOAA Fisheries in Woods Hole, and I'm on the technical committee as well.
I'm Jessica Fisher from New Hampshire Fish and Game, and I'm also on the technical committee.
And Kelly Whitmore, who's from Massachusetts, was unable to be here today. She actually just had a child, so she's on maternity leave. So congrats to her. So Ann Richards is actually interim chair for Kelly while she's on maternity leave. And we'd just like to recognize Maggie Hunter for over 10 years of technical committee chair duties for this species. So thank you very much, Maggie. And I think if you guys don't mind, we'll just briefly do introductions in the audience. We're really interested in who showed up for this workshop. So if you could just tell us a little bit about maybe where you're from, if you're involved in this fishery, whether you're a trapper or trawler, that would be useful information. So I guess we'll start with you.
Yeah, my name is Jay. I'm a PhD student at the University of Maine.
Terry Stockwell, shrimp section chair. Guy Ramblett, Southport, shrimp trapper.
Spencer Fuller, Portland, processing.
Andy Raymond, Associated Fisheries in Maine, representing trawl.
Ben Martinez, Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, trawl.
Chris Vonderway, Maine DMR. I help Terry out with strip stuff because he travels a lot.
Dennis Abbott, New Hampshire, proxy Atlantic States Commissioner for 16 years.
Carla Gunther, Palos Verdes Resource Center.
Hello, Noah Oppenheim, graduate student.
Ronnie Grundy, Stonington, fishing boat and Stony Cove.
Marshall Alexander, owner and operator of the fishing vessel Edie May, shrimp fisherman for over 25 years, and also just got appointed to the industry advisory council.
Mark Bennett, I'm a fisherman from Sorrento. I'm also an APA. Dick Burgess from Deer Isle, shrimp fishing since the 60s.
Rick Trendy, Deer Isle, Stonington area, shrimp fishing, trawl.
Dave Sweeney, fish dragger since 1980.
Shrimp dragger, same too. Maine.
Sherry Patterson, New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. I'm on the shrimp plan development team.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending. If you didn't get, we have an agenda on the table that we're going to go through. And the way this will work is this is our technical committee panel here. I'll be moderating this workshop, so helping move things along. And if you have any questions, clarification, things that come up during our presentation, feel free to ask. It's a pretty small group. We want this to be interactive to some extent, but we'll try and keep the flow moving and not get too bogged down, as we'll have longer question and answer sections after each topic that we go through. So keep that in mind. So if there's aren't any questions before we get started, we'll jump right into it. Any questions on how this is going to run? All right. So we've gone through the workshop goals and structure. We are now on the management and assessment process and history. So as fishery management plan coordinator, I'm going to be describing you first off the bat the fishery management plan for northern shrimp. It was first approved in 1986. It responded to deteriorating conditions in the fishery and the desire for cooperative management. So the shrimp species, northern shrimp, is managed by 3 states. The 3 states are Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, as this stock exists in the Gulf of Maine. So the intent behind the ASMFC joint management is that all 3 states benefit from harvesting this species, so they all have agreed to manage it together. And they do that through our commission. And the managing body that does that is the Northern Shrimp Section. see there's some section members here in the audience. And the way ASMFC is structured is we also have obviously a technical committee that helps us essentially interpret the science and feeds that directly into management. And that's exactly what we're going to be describing today. We also have an advisory panel. Some of the members are in the audience today, and they are composed of industry members from every state and represent the fishery. So help the commission manage this resource, as they're the ones on the water that know, you guys know the resource the best, and therefore the feedback that you give is a big part of the management process. So just a little bit more history on the shrimp management plan. It was amended twice. The first time was in 2004. And the main management options that were composed in that document were basically a season closure. So that's how the northern shrimp fishery has been managed in the past, is through a closed season. And then there were gear modifications. The finfish excluder device that limited bycatch of finfish species. So there was different, in the mesh size, cotton strengthener, that sort of thing went into Amendment 1. Amendment 2 was much more recent. It was in 2011. It maintained essentially the same management measures that were implemented in Amendment 1, but included some flexibility to manage the season and the catch rates that occur during the season. So examples of those management options were trip limits, trap limits, and days out of the fishery, which helps slow the catch rates as we now manage using a total allowable catch or a quota through the season, jointly with the closed season measure. So those three management options were flexibility introduced in the plan to slow catch rates to prolong the season length. Currently, actually, this is unique timing as we have an addendum out to Amendment 2. And this is a document that we have out for public comment until tomorrow, where the comment period will close. And we've actually scheduled the Northern Shrimp Section and AP meeting for November 9th. That's coming up. It'll be here in Portland. And essentially, the section will work to finalize that document with input and recommendations from the advisory panel. So we encourage people to provide comment. The document's available on our website. It is in response, this document is in response to incomplete reporting and continued fluctuations in participation, which has led to an overharvest of the TAC over the last 3 fishing seasons. So because an overharvest of the quota jeopardizes the fishery, this document is considering different management measures that may help essentially get those overages reduced down to what our actual quota is. So there's some other management options, such as gear modifications to eliminate the retention of small shrimp. Remember, all of these are potential options. And then there's some accountability measures for the quota and the ability to split up the TAC by both state and gear. Those are all options to provide some more flexibility to manage this resource. And then it also continues on the development of a limited entry program. Keeping in mind, limited entry will not be implemented through this addendum, but it requests some feedback on potential limited entry programs for northern shrimp. So that's what that document does. That one's up. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about stock assessments. That's really the focus of today. So we have 2 major components of assessments in our assessment process. The first is a benchmark stock assessment, and that's one that's more of a lengthy process. It occurs every 5 years because it is a lengthy process, and it involves several different steps. So first, there's a data workshop that essentially looks to include all the data that's available for a resource that we're trying to assess. So for northern shrimp, it goes out and gets all the different data sets that are available for northern shrimp. Then there's an assessment workshop, which essentially works to develop all the different types of models that could be used to input the data and come up with results for what this assessment of the stock is. And we'll get into the details of this through the workshop. And the reason why it's called a benchmark is because this assessment gets peer reviewed, meaning that it is, after its completion, it is sent out to independent experts that are not affiliated with the shrimp resource, are not often affiliated with ASMFC either. And so they're completely independent. They know this stuff very well, and they review the science to make sure it meets the scientific merits of the standards that they have developed through the peer assessment process. So what often happens is that biological reference points, when we talk about biological reference points, those are reference points that we use to assess stock health. And we'll get into that a little later as well. But those are often reviewed through the peer review process to see if they fit for the resource we are assessing. The other assessment component that we do is an update assessment. This actually occurs every year. This, which is not the case for all of our species that the Commission manage, but is the case for shrimp. And it's called a turn of the crank because it simply updates the data with the new years of data since the last assessment with no change in model structure. It actually doesn't go through an independent peer review. So that's what we currently rely on and have relied on for quite some time to give us an idea of what the shrimp resource looks like on an annual basis. So this is done every year. And it actually is a significant workload, but it's very important to know where the resource is on an annual basis so we can manage it appropriately. So this is just to provide you a little bit of history, not only of where, so the gray shaded area is how biomass has looked since 1985. And then the solid line is the fishing mortality rate. And that's the rate at which shrimp are removed from the water. And so you can see there's peaks and valleys throughout. But currently, in 2011, we are in an overfish state, meaning biomass is below the biomass threshold, which that's how we define stock status. If the biomass of shrimp falls below a threshold level, we consider the stock overfished. And then if fishing mortality rises above a fishing mortality threshold, we consider that overfishing is occurring. And these are those biological reference points that I was referring to in the other slide. That's what we use to assess the stock. And that's what gets goes through the peer review process as well. So a little bit of history on when have we done benchmark stock assessments? When have we had peer-reviewed stock assessments? So if you look down at the bottom line, if you can see it, I'll explain it. We had it, usually these occur every 5 years. So we had one in 87, we skipped out on one in between, and then we had one every 5 years since 97, and we've got one actually coming up. We're currently preparing for a benchmark stock assessment in 2013. So the other thing I wanted to point out is this, when the amendments occurred. And usually once we go through a benchmark stock assessment, there may be new biological reference points that come out of those benchmarks. And so often management is reactive to those benchmark stock assessments and usually follows suit. So I just wanted to explain a little of the history there. So the stock assessment updates, the one that occur annually, the section, the Northern Shrimp section, which is the body that manages this resource, uses the stock assessment updates to manage the shrimp fishery. For those of you that have been in this fishery for a while, you understand that. And we're going to go into that in more detail to help explain all the ins and outs a little bit later. One thing that I thought was impressive is that the technical committee, I shouldn't say we, the technical committee has been running annual updates since 1976. So they have updated the stock assessment for this resource every year since 1976. And like I mentioned, that is not necessarily the norm for our species. So it's nice to have those annual stock assessments to see where the stock is on an annual basis. And then the reason that we do those annual stock assessments, or one of the reasons besides the importance of it, is that northern shrimp is a very short-lived species. And so that segues into our next section, which will be presented by Jessica Fisher, which is essentially the northern shrimp life history. But before we go there, I'll ask, are there any questions on what I've presented to you over the last couple of weeks? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll turn it over to Jessica. She will be talking to you about Northern Shrimp Life History.